Hello, folks, and I am more bullish on crypto than ever. And this is why. Had a very good reading today. The producer price index, which was horrid last month, soaring at zero point 0.9, actually went negative this month at zero point 0.1. What this means is there was probably some occurrence last month that made it suddenly soar, and that occurrence went away. So for the 2 months, the gain cumulatively was 0.8, which means 0.4 a month. Now that's still average, a little higher than usual, but it's in the bearable range. I was really afraid that the producer price index was going to go up another 0.7 or 0.9 this month, which would jeopardize interest rate cuts. But now, since it's gone down 0.1, and I expect tomorrow's CPI to be pretty good as well. I expect it, CPI does follow producer price index, but because last month was like a one-off thing, I don't expect CPI to jump all that much. And even if it does, I do expect it to come down next month. And even if CPI jumps a little bit, I think because of the bad labor reports, Powell essentially has no room to maneuver and he has to cut. The question is, will he cut by 25 or 50 basis points? I think the chance for 50 is growing, but I still think it favors 25. But that doesn't really matter. Yes, has the market priced in 25? Yes, it has. It has not priced in 50, so if he cuts 50 next week, we are going to soar. But we're going to soar anyways because with the current data coming in, I do believe he's going to cut 25, and then he's going to say we're open to more cuts. And what's probably going to happen because of the bad labor numbers, and assuming that CPI doesn't completely explode, which is kind of doubtful, I think he's going to cut 25 each time of the next 3 times. Right now, the interest is around 4.25 or so. That will bring it around 3.5. And that is really the range where people will actually go out of interest-bearing things like bonds or discount-bearing things like bonds and go into more risky assets like stocks and, of course, crypto. Especially as the cost of borrowing money comes down, I think people will be a little more brave in doing so. And some people, when the economy goes bad, some of them might get desperate enough to be like, you know what, I can't get out of my situation any other way. Let's just go for broke and do some crypto. You shouldn't do that because you're probably just going to lose all your money. But the people that do are going to boost up our coins. Some little, some lot. I'm not really sure which ones will actually go up the most, but overall the situation is very, very favorable to crypto. Now, what about the tariffs? Well, we don't really know if they're going to get declared illegal or not. And at this point, with the way the Supreme Court's ruling, it's looking like it's not going to get declared illegal because they'll basically give Trump the power to do anything he wants. At least like that's what the other rulings, not specifically this ruling, says. I'm hoping I'm wrong on that one. But based on the way they have been ruling so far, it does actually look like that they'll find some BS excuse to allow the tariffs to actually stay, even though he doesn't necessarily have the powers to do that. They'll probably make up some like emergency thing or like do some shadow docket like they did with the other thing. But that might not actually matter all that much because we're probably going to get the cuts first. And even though the tariffs will probably spike inflation in the coming months, not like particularly this month's CPI, but maybe like in 2 or 3 months, because they did do away with the de minimis exception, which means things under $800 are actually being taxed and being tariffed now by the United States. That comprises of like 80-90% of all the sales. So like small businesses, they're going to have to jack their prices up, as well many other businesses. And like I said, big businesses can really like only offset price and eat up the price increase themselves for a while. So it'll slowly work its way into the system as well. But that's going to take time, and I don't think that's going to happen before we get our 3 rate cuts. And after we get our 3 rate cuts, if inflation starts going up, then that's even better for us because remember, people want their yield or their money to be making more money than the inflation because otherwise they're negative. So with inflation going up, with basically bonds going down, they will be forced out of the safe market into the more risky waters of crypto. So I think this is what I've been talking about for a couple of weeks now at this point. And I think that's what's actually going to happen. Yes, there is a danger of stagflation at this specific point. especially if the tariffs are not declared illegal and the de minimis exception hits over the next couple of months. We could have inflation going up to 4 or 5%. We could have labor numbers actually coming down, although I'm not really sure if like rate cuts will actually help the labor issue. And I'm sure like all the numbers that have come out will actually be rounded down. I mean, whether it's like Biden's guy or Trump's guy, they all round the numbers down because the numbers are inflated when they first predict, and then the BLS does actually round them down afterwards after they get the actual data. Remember, the first projections from the BLS are just predictions. The second one, after a couple of months, are actually when they get the real data from the labor market, and then they can actually make an accurate assessment. They're usually somewhat off on their first prediction because they don't know the exact number of jobs created, blah, 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 until they actually get the real labor numbers. So the thing is, like, things are going to play in our favor at least for the next 3 or 4 months, and that's what we need. So I'm pretty confident we're going to get at least one bull run, and I do expect us to actually go up once the CPI does come out, as long as it's not horrible, and I don't expect it to be horrible. If it's like 3.4, 3.5, then we're in trouble, but I don't think it'll go anywhere near that high. Or at least I'm crossing my fingers and hoping it's not going that high, because that would be pretty darn horrible. And, with the rates coming down and with the ETFs coming through in November, and with institutions really buying more, I definitely see a pump October, November, December. That's just on schedule for the 4-year cycle. Now, is it coincidence that the timing happens with the 4-year cycle, or at least one of the 4-year cycles? Because the last cycle actually peaked for alts in April and not really November, December. The November pump, yeah, some of the alts peaked, but most of the alts peaked. The overall alts coin market cap actually peaked in April. This won't really follow 2021. It'll follow 2017 more if that's the case. But like I said before, we could get 2 bull runs instead of 1 because Trump's guy is going to come in May, and then he's going to slash rates next year. And I think that if he slashes rates to 1 or 2%, I think that'll have another pump when it loosens up the money supply, and then we'll get that second pump, which would actually make this one of the better pumps if we actually just even have an average bull run. In the first one, they'll have like a little second one tacked on before everything kind of starts falling apart. So that's kind of like what I'm looking at right now, and that's why I'm very, very bullish, more bullish than ever, than I've been in a long time in crypto, because like the PPI has essentially told me all I need to know about like how likely we are to get rate cuts. And it's pretty much 100% now, barring some really huge outstanding circumstance. The only question is, will we get 25 or 50? And if we get 25, I'm pretty sure we're going to get consecutive 325 cuts. So I'm not really worried about that. You also have a lot of other factors, like Paul Atkins, the guy at the SEC, says like he favors like crypto super apps. And he also says like he believes that the government should not interfere unless there's clear evidence there's fraud and things like that, which means he's not really interested in interfering at all. I don't think like any claims of crypto fraud are really going to get taken up in this case because he is very, very loose about it. And, not too many of those claims of fraud get pursued anyways. And I think it's going to be even less under Paul Atkins, which means it's going to be the wild, wild west for at least the rest of Trump's term. And that might not seem safe to a lot of you guys, but if you want the high volatility and the massive bull runs, that's really what you want. Because let's face it, rug pulls and huge volatility, huge spikes kind of go hand in hand. And that's really kind of how this market works. If there weren't so many rug pulls, wouldn't be the volatility and there wouldn't be the excitement. And people who are trying to make a bundle, like people ask about 20, 30x, that's the kind of action that they demand from the market. So I'm sure we're going to get some of that action now. And so I'm very bullish. I think they'll be interested. I think they'll come back in. And that'll pump the amount of money in the market way, way up. And on the other hand, outside of the regulations, the big institutions are still buying. Every time like Saylor runs out of money, he somehow generates like $50 million more dollars, I think more or less issuing stocks in order to buy Bitcoin. This guy is an animal, and he is not going to stop buying Bitcoins anytime soon. Like he basically wants to double his Bitcoin stash, and he will stop at nothing until he achieves 5% of the entire Bitcoin stash. Now, that could honestly end up in disaster a few years from now. I personally don't think so, but I'm watching that very closely. But at least for the next couple of months, it's very, very bullish. It's also extremely bullish that companies have finally taken a liking to the Ethereum ETF and are not just paying attention to the Bitcoin ETF anymore. Because one of the fears was they don't really care about any other ETF. They only care about the Bitcoin ETF. And when they only care about the Bitcoin ETF, they're not going to buy any of these other altcoin ETFs as they come out. But the institutional interest in Ethereum has shattered that belief, and as Ethereum sees more and more inflows. Plus, we have the Rex Osprey ETF, and that's garnered over $200 million since its launch in July, and that is the Solana staking ETF, which is available in the United States. Now, I'll be very interested once the Doge ETF version comes out. I don't think that one has staking, to see how much Doge actually gets. I don't expect very much, but that means there are significant people interested in Solana ETF, at least one with staking. So to me, that tells me that there is some demand, at least, for another ETF outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And that's very important because that is one of the triggers to the altcoin bull run. We're going to get ETFs with probably 10 coins in October, November. And some of that money coming in will definitely contribute to the overall altcoin bull run. Obviously, institutions buying Bitcoin will further the bull run. So I am very, very bullish on that aspect of it too. And plus, like I think like people are starting to talk more about Bitcoin now. Other countries some of them are like starting to rely on cryptos or stable coins to be their national currency. Others are wanting a crypto reserve. Venezuela, because of the hyperinflation, has actually switched to basically USDT tether. They call that Binance dollar for some odd reason, probably because it's pegged to the dollar, and Binance is a huge supporter of it. They actually are using USDT essentially as their actual medium exchange currency instead of the Venezuelan Bolivar, because that is hyperinflated. We have several countries that have asked about Bitcoin National Reserve or Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. So the entire world is actually catching on. And obviously, because Trump wants to make this the crypto capital of the world, the US is following suit, loosening its regulations, and of course, promoting more crypto development. So it's going to be very, very messy. There's going to be a lot of rug pulls, and generally scams are not going to be prosecuted. But realistically, for a market to have the kind of volatility that we want the market to have, that is more or less inevitable, and that's just something that comes along with the package. Now, that's not to say that is a feature of crypto. It's still a flaw of crypto, but it's a flaw of crypto that actually allows the volatility feature to kind of work. You can't grasp everything tightly in your hand if you want high volatility, and crypto industry enthusiasts want high volatility. If it wasn't for the massive volatility, I don't think a lot of people would actually be in crypto. And the hands-off approach of Paul Atkins and the Trump administration overall, a lot because Trump does actually have his own meme coins out there and shit coins out there. That is actually going to basically kind of like be an incubator for the wild, wild west version of crypto that we've come to know and love. But now it's with a lot more money. Don't think it's going to cause any kind of economic collapse, but I think you're going to see a lot more scams, more like rug pulls, and of course, even exchange collapses because of this. But whatever comes out of that mess will actually be much bigger than it is now. And once that's kind of set in stone and there's a lot of money in it, it's going to be very hard for anyone that wants to change the rules to actually change the rules. Plus, like, Elizabeth Warren's like 1 billion years old. So like by the time like they want to change this, she might not actually be around anymore, or at least not be a senator anymore. And at that point, like, I don't know if anyone else is going to be willing to take up the fight. So right now, like at least for the next several months, I am very, very bullish on crypto. I do believe in a big surge of bull run and probably another surge next year. I don't know which surge will actually be bigger, but I do actually think the rate cuts next week will start it. Now, we might not basically go up the day of the rate cuts. There might be actually a little bit of a pullback of buy the rumor, sell the news, but that physical effect of the interest rates being lower will slowly start to turn money in favor of risk assets like cryptos and stocks. So overall, like, a couple of months from now, things should actually be looking very, very bullish. Just be sure to cash out on time, because I think the crash is going to be for the entire economy, and the crash is actually going to be pretty big when it happens. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, hit the bell notifications button. Thank you, and have a nice day.